You start cleaning the kitchen, but then you find a stray sock. So you go to the laundry room, where you notice the dryer is linty, so you go to find the vacuum. And 2 hours later, you are in the garage looking at old photo albums. When a body double is present, they act as a physical reminder of what you are supposed to be doing. Their presence creates a small amount of social pressure that keeps you in the room. It's like having a co-pilot in your cockpit. Sarah found that she could never clear her desk if she was home alone. She would always find a reason to go to the kitchen for a snack or check the mail. But when her husband Mark sat at the dining table to pay bills, Sarah found she could stay at her desk for an hour straight. Mark wasn't managing her, he was just being a physical anchor for her external brain. Building your first prosthetic. If you are feeling overwhelmed right now, that is normal. The goal of this chapter isn't to make you go out and buy 50 clear bins and tear the doors off your cabinets. That would be another all-or-nothing cycle that leads to burnout. Instead, we want to look for one single point of performance that is currently causing you pain. Think about your daily routine. Where is the crash happening? Is it the moment you walk in the door and drop your mail? Is it the moment you try to start dinner and realize the counters are covered in clutter? Is it the moment you try to go to sleep, but your nightstand is covered in half-empty water glasses and books? Put the empty trash bags on the floor, right in front of the refrigerator, on Tuesday afternoon. You will have to step over them to get your dinner. That physical obstruction is your external brain reminding you of the task at the exact point of performance. The shift from shame to design. The most important part of designing an external brain isn't the trays or the hooks. It is the shift in how you see yourself. When Sarah Jenkins looked at her neon orange tray, she stopped seeing herself as a messy mom. She started seeing herself as a designer. She realized that her environment was a tool, and if the tool wasn't working, she could change it. She stopped apologizing to Mark for losing things. Instead, she would say, "The system for the mail isn't working yet. I need to move the basket lower so I can see it better." This turned the problem from a character flaw into a design challenge. Your home is not a museum. It is not a set for a magazine shoot. It is a machine that is supposed to help you live your life. If the machine is broken, you don't blame the person using it. You fix the machine. As we move forward, we are going to look at how to apply this cockpit thinking to every room in your house. We will look at how to handle the Mount Rushmore of laundry and the digital doom piles on your computer. But it all starts with this one truth. You do not need a better brain. You just need a better environment. Take a look around the room you are in right now. Forget about what looks nice or what a normal person would do. Look at the places where you struggle. Look at the spots where the clutter always piles up. If you could put one physical cue in this room, a sign, a clear bin, a bright tray, or a simple hook, that would make the right thing easier to do, what would it be? Stop trying to force your brain to climb a mountain it wasn't built to climb. Instead, start building the stairs. Your external brain is waiting to be designed. What is the very first step you are going to take to make your environment support the person you actually are, rather than the person you think you should be? Chapter 3. Resilience. The Art of Starting Over. From high above, the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts, looks like a quiet grid of red brick and cobblestone. In the late 1800s, the streets were filled with horses and carriages. People moved with a sense of purpose. They went to work, they went to church, and they kept their homes in order. To a casual observer, life in this college town seemed as steady as a clock. But if you could zoom through the walls of a grand house near Harvard University, you would find a man who felt like his internal clock was permanently broken. William James sat in his study, surrounded by stacks of paper and heavy books. To the outside world, he was a brilliant professor from a famous family. His brother Henry was a world-famous writer. But inside, William felt like he was drowning. He lived with a constant cloud of nervous energy. He struggled to focus. He would start a project with a burst of fire, only to watch it flicker out a few days later. He felt like a failure because he couldn't maintain the simple, steady habits that seemed to come so easily to everyone else. In the winter of 1870, William hit a low point. He looked at his life and saw a trail of unfinished tasks and broken promises. He began to believe that his brain was simply wired incorrectly and that he would never be able to change. He fell into a deep, dark depression. He felt like a ship without a rudder, tossed around by every wave of emotion or distraction. He was stuck in a loop of trying, failing, and then hating himself for failing. This self-hatred was so heavy that he didn't know if he could keep going. One afternoon, William made a choice that would change the course of psychology forever. He decided that his first act of free will would be to believe in free will. He stopped trying to fix his entire soul all at once. Instead, he decided to focus on the smallest possible actions. He stopped asking, "Why am I like this?" and started asking, "What is one tiny thing I can do right now?" He spent years studying how the human brain forms habits. In 1890, he published a famous book called The Principles of Psychology. In it, he wrote a massive chapter simply titled Habit. He realized that habits are like paths worn into a field. The more you walk a certain way, the deeper the path becomes. But he also discovered something that most people miss. For people with volatile temperaments, those who feel things deeply and get distracted easily, the biggest problem isn't the habit itself. The biggest problem is the emotional hangover that happens when they slip up. The weight of the emotional hangover. William James understood that most people think of habits as a straight line. You start at point A and you go to point B. If you stop moving, you have failed. But James saw it differently. He knew that for a brain like his, life is not a straight line. It is a series of starts and stops. He argued that the most important part of building a life wasn't the not stopping. It was the starting over. When someone with ADHD misses a day of cleaning or forgets to check their planner, they don't just feel like they missed a task. They feel like they have committed a crime. They fall into what we now call a shame spiral. This is a heavy, spinning wheel of negative thoughts. It starts with a small mistake, like leaving a load of laundry in the washer until it smells like a wet dog. Instead of just washing the clothes again, the brain begins to attack. It says, "You always do this." Then it says, "You are a lazy person." Then it says, "Why even bother trying to be organized? You'll just mess it up again tomorrow." This shame is like a thick fog. It makes the simple act of moving the laundry feel like trying to lift a mountain. The person becomes paralyzed, not because the task is hard, but because the feelings surrounding the task are too painful to face. William James taught that the only way to break this loop is to treat the lapse as a neutral event. A lapse is just a data point. It is not a moral failing. He believed that the resumption of effort was the highest form of human strength. The goal isn't to never fall off the horse. The goal is to get back on the horse as quickly as possible, without spending any energy yelling at yourself for falling. Sarah and the Mount Washmore. Sarah Jenkins stood in her hallway in Austin, Texas, staring at a pile of clothes that her family called Mount Washmore. Just 3 days ago, she had made a plan. She was going to do one load of laundry every single day. No more, no less. For 2 days it worked. She felt like a superhero. She felt normal. But on the third day, her daughter Mia got a fever. The fourth day was a deadline for a big design project. By the fifth day, Sarah realized she hadn't even looked at the laundry room. Now the pile was bigger than ever. Towels were mixed with school uniforms. A stray sock sat on top of the pile like a flag of defeat. Sarah felt that familiar heat in her chest. She felt like she wanted to cry. She had told her husband Mark that she was going to get a handle on things this time. She had bought new, pretty laundry baskets. She had a chart. And yet, here she was, failing again. Her brain started the script. "You're just pretending to be organized. You're a mess. Mark is going to come home and see this and think you don't care." She wanted to walk away. She wanted to go into her bedroom, close the blinds, and scroll on her phone until the feeling went away. She felt like the organization project was over. If she couldn't even do one load a day, what was the point of trying to fix the whole house? Then, she remembered a small piece of advice she had read. It was about the emotional hangover. She realized she wasn't actually upset about the laundry. She was upset about who she thought she was because of the laundry. She took a deep breath and tried to look at the pile as if she were a scientist. "The laundry is on the floor," she said out loud. "That is all that is happening. I missed 3 days. That is also all that is happening." She didn't try to do the whole pile. She didn't try to catch up by doing 5 loads in one night, which she knew would lead to a burnout by 10 p.m. She reached down, picked up one armful of whites, and walked to the machine. She didn't apologize to the house. She didn't yell at herself. She just resumed the effort. The art of the 5-minute rule. The reason Sarah was able to move toward the laundry machine was because she used a trick called the 5-minute rule. This is a tool designed to bypass the part of the brain that feels overwhelmed. When you look at a giant mess, your brain's fight or flight center turns on. It sees the mess as a threat, like a tiger in the bushes. Your brain wants to protect you, so it tells you to run away or shut down. The 5-minute rule tells the brain, we aren't doing the whole thing. We are only doing this for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, we can stop. Most of the time, the hardest part of any task is the transition. It is the move from not doing to doing. Once Sarah started the machine, the tiger in her brain went back to sleep. The task wasn't a threat anymore. It was just a thing she was doing. By setting a low bar for herself, she made it safe to start over. This is the secret to resilience with ADHD. We often set the bar so high that we are afraid to even try. We think we have to be perfect to be good. But in a home that works with an ADHD brain, done is always better than perfect. A half-folded basket of laundry is better than a pile on the floor. A kitchen counter with one clear spot is better than a counter covered in mail. Finding beauty in the broken. In Japan, there's an ancient art form called kintsugi. When a ceramic bowl or plate breaks, the artists don't throw the pieces away. They don't try to hide the cracks with clear glue to make the bowl look new again. Instead, they repair the cracks using a special lacquer mixed with gold or silver. The result is a bowl that is more beautiful than the original. The gold lines show exactly where the breaks happened. The history of the object is part of its beauty. The repair makes the bowl stronger. This is how we must look at our routines in our homes. When your routine breaks, and it will, you don't throw away the whole system. You don't call yourself a broken bowl. You simply apply the gold lacquer of resilience. You pick up the pieces and you start again. Each time you start over, you are building a new kind of strength. You are proving to yourself that a mistake is not the end of the world. Thomas Edison, the man who gave us the light bulb, understood this deeply. He didn't find the right way to make a light bulb on his first try, or his 10th, or his 500th. He famously said that he hadn't failed. He had just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. For someone with ADHD, every failed organization system is just a way that didn't work for your brain. It is data. It tells you that maybe you need a clear bin instead of an opaque one, or a hook instead of a hanger. The law of never suffering an exception. William James had a very strict rule for the beginning of a habit. He said that when you are trying to create a new path in the brain, you should try to never suffer an exception to occur until the new habit is securely rooted. He compared it to dropping a ball of string you are trying to wind up. One slip can undo a lot of the work you have already done. This sounds scary to someone with ADHD. It sounds like perfectionism. But James wasn't talking about being perfect. He was talking about the power of momentum. He knew that the more wins we have in a row, the more our brain starts to believe that we are the kind of person who can succeed. James also knew that life happens. People get sick. Deadlines move. Fires need to be put out. His real genius was in what he said should happen after the ball of string drops. He said that the resumption of effort must be immediate and without self-reproach. If you drop the string, you don't stand there crying about the string. You don't tell the string it's a bad string. You just pick up the end and start winding again. The goal isn't to have a perfectly wound ball of string on the first day. The goal is to keep winding. The two paths of the afternoon. Think about two different versions of the same afternoon. In the first version, you wake up and realize you forgot to do the dishes the night before. You feel a wave of guilt. You spend 20 minutes thinking about how messy you are. You look at the crusty plates and feel tired. You decide to go get coffee to wake up, but you end up sitting in the drive-thru for 30 minutes. You come home and the dishes are still there, but now you feel even worse because you wasted time. You don't do the dishes at all. The next morning, the pile is twice as big. In the second version, you wake up and see the dishes. You feel the same wave of guilt. But this time you recognize it. You say, oh, there's that emotional hangover. You give yourself permission to be a human who forgets things. You set a timer for 5 minutes. You tell yourself you only have to wash the forks. While you wash the forks, you feel a little bit better. You decide to wash the plates too. By the time the timer goes off, the sink is half empty. You haven't fixed your whole life, but you have stopped the string from unrolling any further. You have resumed the effort. The second version is the path of resilience. It is not the path of someone who is cured of ADHD. It is the path of someone who has learned to work with their brain instead of against it. Building the muscle of starting over. Resilience is a muscle. The first time you try to start over without shaming yourself, it will feel fake. You will feel like you are lying to yourself. You will think, I really am lazy. I'm just pretending I'm not. But as you continue to use the gold lacquer of self-compassion, the muscle gets stronger. You start to realize that the failure isn't a mess. The mess is just a physical thing in a room. The failure is when you let the mess tell you who you are. William James eventually found his way out of the darkness. He became one of the most respected thinkers in history. He never stopped being a man who struggled with his energy and his focus. He never became a perfectly organized person in the way we think of it today. But he became a man who knew how to start. He learned that the stream of consciousness is always moving, and if you get stuck in a whirlpool of shame, the only thing to do is to paddle back into the current. Sarah Jenkins didn't finish all the laundry that day in Austin. She got 2 loads done. She didn't fold them perfectly. She put the clean clothes into baskets and put them in the kids' rooms. But that evening when Mark came home, she didn't hide in the bedroom. She didn't feel like a bad mom. She stood in her kitchen and looked at the laundry baskets. They weren't a sign of failure. They were a sign that she had dropped the string and picked it back up. She had survived the emotional hangover. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was the one in charge of her home, rather than the home being in charge of her. The art of starting over is the most important skill you will learn in this book. Every system we build, the external brain, the launchpad, the visual pantry, will eventually break. You will forget to use your trays. You will let mail pile up on the counter. You will go a week without looking at your planner. When that happens, you have a choice. You can fall into the shame spiral and stay there for a month. Or you can look at the mess, say, "That's a lot of data," and set a timer for 5 minutes. You can be the artist who repairs the bowl with gold. You can be the person who winds the string. You can be like William James and choose to believe that your next act, the very next thing you do with your hands, is an act of free will. You don't need a new personality. You don't need to stop having ADHD. You just need to learn how to come back. The door to a clear home is always open. You don't have to earn your way back in. You just have to walk through it. One sock, one dish, and one 5-minute win at a time. Chapter 4. 5 Pillars of Sensory-Friendly Decluttering. In 1904, the world seemed to be growing faster than the human mind could follow. That summer, the city of St. Louis, Missouri turned into a sparkling vision of the future. The World's Fair had arrived. It was a massive event, covering over 1,000 acres of land. There were palaces built of white plaster that looked like marble, glowing with thousands of brand-new electric light bulbs. People traveled from every corner of the globe to see the latest inventions. They saw the first X-ray machines, the first electric typewriters, and even the first ice cream cones. It was a celebration of more. More lights, more machines, more noise, and more stuff. Inside the Palace of Manufactures, the scale of this more became physical. The building was 14 acres large. Under one roof, thousands of booths displayed every household item imaginable. There were rows upon rows of shoes, clocks, furniture, and tools. The air was thick with the smell of ozone from the humming wires and the scent of floor wax. The sound was a constant roar. Thousands of people talking at once, the clatter of heavy boots on wooden floors, and the rhythmic thumping of display looms. For many visitors, the experience was a dream come true. But for others, it was a nightmare they didn't have a name for yet. A young woman visiting the fair might have started her day with excitement. She wanted to see the future. But by noon, something strange would happen. Her head would begin to throb. The bright glare of the electric lights, which everyone praised as a miracle, felt like needles in her eyes. The sheer number of things to look at, the patterns on the rugs, the shiny brass of the lamps, the crowded shelves of dishes, made it hard for her to breathe. She felt a strange nerve exhaustion. At the time, doctors called this neurasthenia. They thought it was a price people paid for living in a modern, fast-paced world. The fair organizers noticed that hundreds of people were breaking down. They weren't sick with a fever. They were simply done. Their brains had shut off. To fix this, the fair had to build something that wasn't in the original plans. Rest cottages and quiet zones. These were plain rooms with soft light, simple colors, and no displays. When a visitor stepped inside, the roar of the 20th century vanished. The nerve exhaustion began to lift. In those quiet rooms, people found they could finally think again. They could decide which exhibit to see next. They could remember where they left their umbrellas. They discovered a truth that we are still learning today. When the world outside is too loud, the world inside the mind becomes a mess. The invisible wall of stuff. Many people think decluttering is just about getting rid of trash. They think it is a test of willpower, or a matter of cleaning up. But for an ADHD brain, a messy room is not just a pile of objects. It is a 1904 World's Fair happening in a space the size of a bedroom. Every stray sock, every unwashed dish, and every stack of mail is shouting for attention. The brain sees a patterned rug and treats every swirl of color as a piece of data to be processed. It hears the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a clock and tries to track both at once. This is what we call sensory overload. It is the invisible wall that stops you from starting a task. When your environment is loud, your brain spends all its energy just trying to survive the noise. It has no energy left for the hard work of deciding what to keep and what to throw away. This is why you might walk into a cluttered room, feel a wave of heat in your face, and immediately walk back out to sit on your phone. You aren't lazy. You are suffering from nerve exhaustion. To clear the clutter, we have to lower the volume of the room first. We have to turn our homes into those rest cottages from the St. Louis Fair. We do this by looking at the home through 5 specific pillars of sensory input. When we fix these 5 things, the brain's boss, the part that makes decisions, finally has the quiet it needs to work. The first pillar, visual noise. Visual noise is anything in your line of sight that pulls at your attention without you meaning to look at it. Think back to the Palace of Manufactures. The reason it was so tiring was that there was no blank space for the eyes to rest. In an ADHD-friendly home, blank space is a tool. Most organization books tell you to buy clear bins so you can see your stuff. While this helps with object permanence, too many clear bins can actually create visual noise. If you have a shelf with 10 clear bins, and each bin is filled with colorful, messy items, your brain is seeing 10 different puzzles to solve every time you walk by. The goal is to hide the chaos while keeping the clue. This means using solid colored bins, but labeling them with large, clear words or pictures. It means clearing the visual horizon, the surfaces you see when you first walk into a room or when you sit down to work. If your desk is covered in pens, papers, and coffee mugs, your brain is constantly pinging those items. Even if you aren't using them, your brain is checking to see if they are important. The second pillar, auditory input. Sound is the most underestimated enemy of decluttering. When we are trying to organize, we are asking our brains to do heavy lifting. We are making hundreds of tiny decisions. Do I need this? Where does it go? Does this bring me joy? Every background noise acts like a tiny hand pulling on your sleeve while you try to do math. A television playing in the next room, the sound of a neighbor's lawnmower, or even the silence of a house that feels too empty can trigger a stress response. Sarah Jenkins found this out the hard way. One Tuesday afternoon, she decided to finally tackle the toy chest in the living room. Her kids, Leo and Mia, had a habit of dumping everything into one giant wooden box. It was a doom pile for toys. Sarah knew that if she could just sort the Legos from the stuffed animals, the room would feel better. She sat on the floor and pulled the chest toward her. As she reached in, the sound of plastic grinding against plastic sent a shiver up her spine. Every time she moved a toy, it made a sharp clack. The floorboards creaked under her. In the kitchen, the dishwasher was thumping through a cycle. Within 5 minutes, Sarah felt her chest tighten. She felt angry at the toys. She felt like she wanted to scream at the dishwasher. She slammed the lid of the chest shut and went to her room, feeling like a failure. What Sarah didn't realize was that she wasn't failing at organizing. She was failing a noise test. Her brain was so busy processing the sharp sounds of the plastic that it had no room left to sort the items. The next day, she tried again, but this time she wore noise-canceling headphones. She played a brown noise track, a deep, steady hum that sounds like a distant waterfall. Without the clack and thump of the house, the task felt 50% smaller. She finished the chest in 20 minutes. The third pillar, tactile overload. Tactile input is how things feel against your skin. For many people with ADHD, certain textures are itchy to the brain. When you are decluttering, you are touching a lot of things. You might touch dusty paper, sticky plastic, or rough fabric. If you are already feeling overwhelmed, these physical feelings can push you over the edge. This is why many people start cleaning and then suddenly feel like they need to take a shower or change their clothes. Their skin is tired. To combat this, we use the professional method. Professional cleaners often wear thin, comfortable gloves. This creates a barrier between you and the stuff. It stops the sticky or dusty feeling from reaching your brain. It allows you to stay in the flow state longer because you aren't being interrupted by unpleasant physical feelings. The fourth pillar, olfactory and airflow. Smell is the fastest way to change how the brain feels. The 1904 fair smelled like grease and crowded bodies, which added to the feeling of panic. A home that feels stale or has a lingering smell of old trash can keep your brain in a state of low-level fight or flight. When you begin a decluttering session, the first step should always be to change the air. Opening a window, even in winter, for just 5 minutes brings in fresh oxygen. If you can't open a window, using a scent that your brain associates with work or focus, like peppermint or lemon, can act as a signal. This is part of the external brain theory. You are using a smell to tell your brain, we are doing a specific task now. It moves the brain out of the rest zone and into the action zone, without the need for a long internal pep talk. The fifth pillar, lighting. We will talk more about the big light later in this book, but it is a vital pillar of sensory decluttering. Harsh overhead lighting creates shadows and glare. It makes colors look wrong and increases eye strain. Most importantly, it mimics the interrogation lights of a high-stress environment. If you are trying to declutter under a bright, buzzing fluorescent light, your brain is going to want to leave the room. It feels like a hospital or a warehouse. To make a space feel safe enough to organize, use warm light. Use lamps or natural light from a window. When the lighting is soft, the threat level of the clutter goes down. The piles of paper don't look like a mountain, they just look like paper. The wisdom of Temple Grandin. To understand why these pillars matter so much, we can look at the work of Dr. Temple Grandin. She is a famous scientist who sees the world differently because of her autistic brain. She spent her career studying how animals react to their environments. She noticed that cattle would often panic for no reason, or so it seemed to the farmers. Temple would get down on the ground to see what the cows saw. She realized they weren't panicking because they were stupid. They were panicking because of a yellow raincoat hanging on a fence, or a shadow that looked like a hole in the ground, or a sudden whistling sound from a pipe. These tiny sensory details were loud to the animals. Once the raincoat was moved or the shadow was fixed, the animals became calm and followed the path. Our brains are not much different. We often blame our lack of discipline for why we can't keep a clean house. But often, we are just like those cattle. We are panicking because our environment is full of yellow raincoats. We are distracted by the glare on the TV, the smell of the pet bed, or the stack of colorful magazines on the coffee table. Decluttering isn't about being a better person. It is about removing the raincoats so your brain can see the path. The integration, how the pillars work together. When you combine these 5 pillars, you create what is called a sensory-friendly zone. This is how we move from the panic, clean, and crash cycle to a system that actually works. Reduce visual noise. Use solid bins and clear the visual horizon. Control auditory input. Use headphones or background hums to block sharp noises. Manage tactile input. Wear gloves or comfortable clothes to avoid skin tiredness. Refresh the air. Open a window or use a focus scent. Fix the lighting. Turn off the big light and use warm, soft lamps. By doing these 5 things before you pick up a single piece of trash, you have already done 50% of the work. You have lowered the cost of the task. You have made it so your brain doesn't have to fight the room while it tries to clean the room. Sarah's small win back in Austin. Sarah Jenkins sat in her living room, looking at the toy chest she had finished the day before. The room wasn't perfect. There were still crumbs under the sofa, and the curtains were a little dusty. But because the toy chest was closed and the clatter was gone, she felt a strange sense of peace. She realized that for years she had been trying to try harder. She thought she needed a better planner or a stricter schedule. She never realized that the reason she couldn't sort the laundry or clear the table was that the sounds and sights of her home were attacking her. She walked into the kitchen and saw a pile of mail on the counter. Usually, this would make her feel a wave of shame. But today, she didn't look at the mail as a sign that she was a bad mom. She looked at it and thought, that is a lot of visual noise. I'm going to turn on my lamp and put on my headphones before I touch it. She did just that. She turned off the bright kitchen light and turned on the small lamp over the stove. She put on her favorite podcast. She didn't try to sort the whole pile. She just stood there in her rest cottage and sorted for 10 minutes. For the first time in a long time, the nerve exhaustion didn't come. She wasn't just cleaning, she was finally in control of her space. The path to sensory peace. The 1904 World's Fair eventually ended. The massive palaces were torn down, and the thousands of manufactured goods were shipped away. The site returned to being a quiet park in St. Louis. The lesson, however, remained. Humans are not designed to live in a constant state of more. We are designed for rhythm. We need the palace for excitement, but we need the rest cottage to live. Your home should not be a museum of everything you have ever owned. It should not be a warehouse that screams at you from every corner. It should be the place where your brain goes to rest. When you start to see your clutter as sensory noise rather than moral failure, everything changes. You stop asking, "Why am I so messy?" and start asking, "How can I make this room quieter?" One question leads to shame. The other leads to a solution. You do not need to be a different person to have a clear home. You do not need a new personality or a neurotypical brain. You need to dim the lights, block the noise, and give your eyes a place to rest. When the environment stops attacking you, the external brain can finally start helping you. The weight you feel in your chest when you look at a mess isn't laziness. It is your brain's way of saying it is overwhelmed by the fair. It is okay to step into the rest cottage for a moment. It is okay to put on your headphones. It is okay to turn off the big light. In fact, it is the only way to finally see the floor. As you move forward, remember that your home is a tool. It is meant to support you, not drain you. By building these 5 pillars, you are not just cleaning a room. You are building a sanctuary. You are creating a space where the vibrant, creative person you are can finally come out from under the soot of the overwhelm. You are moving from the roar of the fair to the peace of the park. And that is a journey worth taking, one small, quiet step at a time. Chapter 5. The Day the Laundry Won. Pack the cart, Samuel. We haven't a moment to lose. The flames have reached the street. But the silver and the wine, where shall we put them? There is no time for places. Just put them in the field. Move everything to Moorfields. Move it now or watch it burn. In September 1666, these were the sounds of a city dying. The Great Fire of London was turning the world's most crowded city into a giant oven. People didn't have moving trucks or labeled boxes. They had bare hands, small carts, and a blind panic that comes when your life's work is about to turn into ash. Samuel Pepys, a famous diary writer of the time, watched his neighbors doing something that would look very familiar to anyone with an ADHD brain. They weren't organizing. They weren't cleaning. They were panic sorting. They grabbed whatever was closest, clocks, blankets, heavy wooden chests, and even expensive wheels of cheese, and they dragged them into the open fields outside the city walls. By the time the fire died down, the fields of Moorfields looked like the world's largest, saddest yard sale. Thousands of people sat among mountain-high piles of random junk. A fine silk dress was tangled with a dirty cooking pot. A family's legal papers were buried under a pile of damp firewood. The fire was gone, but a new disaster had started. People couldn't find their food. They couldn't find their shoes. They had saved their things from the fire, but they had lost them to the pile. They had moved their belongings, but they had not organized them. This is the exact moment the doom pile was born. The birth of DOOM. When we talk about a doom pile in a modern home, we usually mean that stack of mail on the kitchen table, the basket of clean laundry that has been sitting for 6 days, or that one corner of the bedroom where things go to die. We call it doom because of an acronym that perfectly explains what happened in London in 1666. Didn't organize, only moved. For an ADHD brain, a doom pile is a survival strategy that backfires. When we feel overwhelmed by a mess, our brain treats that mess like the Great Fire of London. We feel a spike of stress. We feel like we have to do something right now to make the visual noise stop. So, we grab a handful of stuff and we move it. We move the mail from the counter to a basket. We move the toys from the floor to a closet. We move the random stuff into a plastic bin. In that moment, we feel a tiny bit of relief. The floor is clear. The counter is visible. We did it. But we didn't actually do it. We just created a Moorfields in our own living room. We moved the problem from one spot to another, but we didn't solve the problem of where these things belong. Because we didn't decide where they belong, the items in that pile become invisible to our brains. They become a blob of stuff that is too scary to touch. The reason these piles are so hard to deal with is something called decision fatigue. Every single item in a doom pile represents a question you haven't answered yet. Do I need to keep this receipt for taxes? Does this toy still have all its parts? Is this shirt clean enough to wear again, or does it need a wash? Answering one question is easy. Answering 50 questions in a row is like running a marathon for your brain. By the 3rd or 4th item, your brain's battery runs out of juice. You shut down, you walk away, and the pile stays there for another 6 months. Sarah and the guest room ghost. Sarah Jenkins knew all about Moorfields, even if she didn't know the history. For her, the fields were located in her guest bedroom. 2 years ago, Sarah and her husband Mark moved into their house in Austin. On moving day, Sarah was exhausted. The kids were crying, the kitchen was a maze of boxes, and she just wanted to be able to sit on the couch. She took the last 10 boxes, the ones filled with miscellaneous stuff from the old junk drawer and the top of the fridge, and shoved them into the guest room. "I'll sort these on Saturday," she told herself. That was 700 Saturdays ago. Every time Sarah walked past that room, she felt a physical weight in her chest. It wasn't just a room, it was a graveyard of things she hadn't decided on. There were old cables for phones she didn't own anymore. There were half-finished craft projects from 2019. There were holiday cards from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Whenever Mark mentioned having his parents over for a weekend, Sarah would feel a flash of anger. It wasn't that she didn't like her in-laws. It was that she was terrified of the guest room. The pile had become a doom room. She had only moved the stuff from her old house, and now she was paying the ADHD tax, in the form of a room she couldn't use and a constant sense of shame. She tried to clean it once. She went in with a trash bag and a determined look on her face. She picked up a single old photograph. 10 minutes later, she was sitting on the floor, crying, looking through a whole stack of photos, completely forgotten about the trash bag. Her brain had ping-ponged from the task of cleaning to the task of remembering. By the time she snapped out of it, she felt so tired she could barely stand. She shoved the photos back into a box, closed the door, and didn't open it again for a month. Sarah's mistake wasn't that she was lazy. Her mistake was that she was trying to sort and decide at the same time. The Janus effect, why we get stuck. To understand why Sarah and most people with ADHD struggles with piles, we have to look at a concept called the Janus effect. Janus was an ancient Roman god with two faces. One face looked into the past, and the other looked into the future. When you look at a doom pile, your brain does the same thing. You pick up an old sweater. 1. The past face. "Oh, I wore this on our first date. It's so soft. Remember that restaurant?" Sentimental clutter. 2. The future face. "I might need this if I ever go hiking in the mountains again. It would be a waste to throw it away." Your brain gets stuck between the past and the future. This creates a mental logjam. They would remember it as the chair their grandfather sat in, the past. They would think about how they might be able to fix it one day, the future. Because they couldn't decide what to do with it right then, they just left it in the mud. The secret to conquering the doom pile isn't to try harder to make decisions. The secret is to stop making decisions entirely until the very end. The triage method, sorting without judging. If you go to a hospital emergency room, you will see a nurse doing something called triage. The triage nurse doesn't perform surgery. They don't give you a long-term diet plan. They don't ask about your childhood. They only ask one question. How bad is the problem right now? They put people into 3 groups. 1. People who need help immediately. 2. People who can wait a little while. 3. People who just need a bandage and can go home. We can use this same triage strategy for our doom piles. Instead of trying to clean or organize, we are going to do a categorization sweep. The goal is to move your hands as fast as possible without letting your brain look at the faces of Janus. You are not allowed to think about the past or the future. You are only allowed to put things into buckets. Here is how you break the doom cycle using the triage method. 1. The 3-container rule. Do not try to sort a pile by putting things back where they belong one by one. That is a trap. If you find a coffee mug in the bedroom and walk it to the kitchen, you will see a dirty dish in the sink. You'll start washing the dish. Then you'll realize you're out of soap. You'll go to the store for soap and come home 3 hours later with a new plant and a bag of chips, and the bedroom pile will still be there. Instead, bring 3 large containers to the pile. They can be laundry baskets, cardboard boxes, or even just 3 different spots on the floor. Bucket A. Trash recycle. This is for things that are clearly garbage. Bucket B. Relocate. This is for things that definitely belong in another room, like that coffee mug. Bucket C. The maybe zone. This is for the things that make your brain ping-pong. If you have to think about it for more than 3 seconds, it goes in this bucket. 2. The 5-minute dash. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Not 20, not an hour. Pick up an item. Don't look at it closely. Just ask, trash, relocate, or maybe. Piece of junk mail? Trash. A shoe? Relocate. A mysterious power cord? Maybe. Toss it into the correct bucket and move to the next thing. If you start to feel the Janus effect, if you start thinking about where that power cord might go, stop. Say maybe out loud and throw it in the bucket. 3. The relocate delivery. Once the timer goes off, you are finished with the pile for now. Take the trash bag to the bin outside. Take the relocate basket and walk through the house. Do not put things away perfectly. Just launch them into the room where they belong. Put the coffee mug on the kitchen counter. Put the shoe by the front door. You are not organizing yet. You are just resetting the stage. Sarah's breakthrough. Sarah decided to try the triage method on just one box in the guest room. She was skeptical. She felt like she was just moving stuff again. But she promised herself she wouldn't try to be perfect. She set her phone timer for 5 minutes. She put on a fast, upbeat song. She opened the box. The first thing she saw was a stack of old magazines. In the past, she would have flipped through them to see if there were any recipes she wanted to save. This time, she didn't even look at the covers. Trash, she whispered. Thump, into the bag they went. Next was a stapler. Relocate. Next was a small wooden box her grandmother had given her. Her brain started to ping-pong. Oh, Grandma used to keep her buttons in this. I remember the smell of her house. Sarah caught herself. Maybe, she said firmly. Into the maybe zone it went. When the timer dinged, the box was empty. For the first time in 2 years, Sarah can see the bottom of that cardboard container. She felt a strange rush of energy. It wasn't the crisis energy she usually felt when she was panic cleaning for guests. It was a calm, steady feeling of control. She realized that the maybe zone wasn't a failure. It was a holding tank for her emotions. By giving herself permission to not decide right now, she had freed up her brain to actually get the work done. The doom pile wasn't a monster anymore. It was just a collection of small tasks. Wide done is better than perfect. The people of London in 1666 eventually had to leave the fields of Moorfields. They couldn't stay there forever. But they didn't wait until the city was perfectly rebuilt to move back. They built shacks and temporary shelters. They focused on function over perfection. In your home, a clear floor is better than a perfectly organized closet. We often get stuck in the doom pile because we think that if we can't do it the right way, there is no point in doing it at all. We think we need the perfect labels, the perfect bins, and the perfect system before we can even start. This is all or nothing thinking, and it is the enemy of the ADHD brain. If you have a pile of laundry on the floor and you move it into a basket, you have only moved it. But if you move it into a basket and put that basket in the laundry room, you have functionalized it. You have moved it closer to the point of performance, a concept we will look at more in the next chapter. The goal of tackling a doom pile isn't to make the stuff disappear. It's to stop the stuff from paralyzing your life. The triage cheat sheet. When you face your next doom pile, use these simple rules to keep your brain from shutting down. Body double, if you can. Have someone else in the room with you. They don't even have to help. They can just sit there and read a book. Their presence acts as an anchor for your attention. Use visual binning. If you use opaque boxes, ones you can't see through, your brain will delete the items inside. Use clear bins or open baskets so you don't lose object permanence. No deep dives. If you find an old letter, do not read it. If you find a toy that needs fixing, do not fix it. You are a triage nurse, not a surgeon. Forgive the maybe. It is okay to have a maybe box. It is better to have 1 box of maybes than 10 boxes of dooms. After Sarah finished her 5-minute dash, she sat on the edge of the guest room bed. She looked at the empty box. She felt proud, but she also felt a little bit of sadness. Why didn't I do this 2 years ago, she wondered. It was so easy. Am I just lazy? This is the emotional hangover of ADHD organization. When we finally complete a task that we've been avoiding for a long time, our brain doesn't always give us a gold medal. Instead, it often gives us a lecture. We start to beat ourselves up for taking so long to do something simple. But here's the truth. It wasn't simple. For Sarah, that box wasn't just filled with paper and staplers. It was filled with 2 years of shame, decision fatigue, and sensory overwhelm. Clearing it wasn't just a physical act. It was a mental victory. If you are staring at a doom pile right now, know that it isn't a reflection of your character. It is just a panic sort that hasn't been finished yet. You are just a person who, like the citizens of London, tried to save your life and your things the only way you knew how. The fire is over. You don't have to panic anymore. Sarah stood up and took the trash bag to the kitchen. She felt lighter. She realized that the guest room wasn't the biggest problem in her house. The guest room was a storage problem. But there was another room that was a working problem. Every single day, she struggled with the most important room in the house. The room where the ADHD tax was the highest. The room where she spent the most money and felt the most time blind. She looked toward the kitchen. She saw the counters covered in mail, the pantry overflowing with things she couldn't see, and the sink full of dishes. If the guest room was a graveyard, the kitchen was the engine room. And right now, the engine was smoking. How could she apply this external brain to a place where things moved so fast? How could she stop buying 4 bags of quinoa because she couldn't find the first 3? She realized that the kitchen wasn't just about stuff. It was about a system that was designed for a brain that wasn't hers. It was time to stop trying to cook in someone else's kitchen and start building one that actually worked for her. But as she walked toward the stove, she realized she had a much bigger problem than just a messy counter. She had forgotten one very important thing. "Mark," she called out, "when did you say your parents were coming?" "In 3 hours," he called back from the garage. "Why?" Sarah looked at the kitchen. 3 hours. For an ADHD brain, 3 hours can feel like 3 minutes or 3 days. Panic started to bubble up in her chest again. The great fire was back. But this time, she had a secret weapon. She knew about the triage, and she was about to learn that the kitchen has its own set of rules. Rules that were invented by the world's most organized and perhaps most stressed people. Chapter 6: Mastering the Kitchen Command Center. A heavy, carbon steel knife rests on a thick wooden block. Its blade is stained with a dark, cloudy pattern from years of slicing through onions and beef. The handle is worn smooth, where a thumb has pressed into it thousands of times. This isn't just a tool, it is a piece of a larger machine. In 1890, if you stood in the basement of the Savoy Hotel in London, a knife like this was the only thing standing between a calm dinner and a total riot. Before this knife found its home, professional kitchens were places of nightmare. Imagine a room filled with thick coal smoke, men screaming at each other, and pots of boiling fat tipping over. There was no order. A single cook might be responsible for making a whole steak, a side of peas, and a complicated sauce all at once. If the steak was ready, but the peas weren't, the meat sat and grew cold. If the sauce broke, the cook had to start over while the customer upstairs grew angry. It was a mess of ping-pong energy, much like the inside of a brain, trying to handle too many tasks at once. Then came a man named Auguste Escoffier. He was short, had a very large mustache, and possessed a mind that hated chaos. He looked at the screaming and the burnt food and realized the problem wasn't that the cooks were lazy or bad at their jobs. The problem was the system. The kitchen was asking the human brain to remember too much in a high-stress moment. Escoffier changed everything by creating the Brigade de Cuisine. He broke the kitchen down into stations. One person only did sauces, one person only did fish, one person only did roasts. But more importantly, he introduced a concept that would become the golden rule for every great chef: mise en place. Translated, it means everything in its place. But for Escoffier, it was more than just putting a bowl on a shelf. It was a mental state. He believed that before a single fire was lit, the environment had to be prepared so that the cook didn't have to use their thinking brain during the rush. They only had to use their doing brain. If a chef had to walk across the room to find a spoon, the system had failed. The spoon should already be there, at the point of performance. Sarah Jenkins stood in her pantry in Austin, Texas, feeling like she was losing a war. It was Tuesday night. Her kids, Leo and Mia, were complaining about being hungry. Her husband, Mark, was still finishing a work call. Sarah had decided to make a healthy grain bowl, but she couldn't find the quinoa. She pushed aside a box of crackers that had been empty for a month. She moved a giant jar of pickles. She dug behind a bag of flour that was leaking white dust onto the shelf. Finally, she found it. But as she pulled the bag out, she realized something that made her want to sit down on the floor. There were already 3 other bags of quinoa in the pantry. 2 were tucked in the very back corner, and 1 was hidden under a pile of napkins. Sarah had bought quinoa 4 times because she couldn't see that she already had it. This was the ADHD tax in its purest form. She was spending money she didn't have on food she didn't need because her kitchen was a black hole. In an ADHD home, the kitchen is often the hardest room to manage. It is the engine room of the house. It requires constant decision-making. What are we eating? Do we have the ingredients? Is the pan clean? How long does it take to cook? For a brain that struggles with time blindness and object permanence, the kitchen is a minefield. Sarah looked at her pantry doors. They were heavy, solid wood. When they were closed, the pantry looked neat to the outside world. But to Sarah's brain, once those doors shut, everything inside ceased to exist. If she couldn't see the quinoa didn't exist. She realized that her kitchen was designed for someone who liked to hide things away, a neurotypical person who finds peace in clear, blank surfaces. But Sarah wasn't that person. She needed a prosthetic environment. Why the kitchen breaks our brains. The reason the kitchen feels so overwhelming is that it is a series of transition points. Every meal has a beginning, a middle, and an end. 1. The setup, finding tools and food. 2. The action, cooking and preparing. 3. The conclusion, cleaning up and putting away. For most people, these 3 steps flow together. For someone with ADHD, each step is a mountain. We get stuck at the setup because we can't find the spatula. We get stuck at the action because we get distracted by a text message and burn the onions. We get stuck at the conclusion because the dopamine of the meal is over, and washing a greasy pan feels like trying to climb Mount Everest in flip-flops. Escoffier's mise en place was designed to fix exactly this. He knew that under pressure, the human brain loses its ability to plan. He made sure that the environment did the planning for the chef. In a professional kitchen, you don't search for a knife. The knife is in the same spot every single day. You don't guess if you have enough salt. The salt is in a clear container, right at eye level. This is the external brain in action. Sarah decided to take a page out of Escoffier's book. She went to the garage, grabbed the screwdriver, and did something that would have made a home decorator scream. She took the doors off her pantry. Suddenly, the black hole was gone. She could see the quinoa. She could see the crackers. She could see that they had 10 cans of black beans and 0 cans of tomato sauce. By removing the physical barrier, she removed the mental barrier. She was no longer asking her brain to remember what was behind the wood. She was letting her eyes do the work. The visual pantry and clear bins. The first rule of an ADHD-friendly kitchen is, if you can't see it, you don't have it. Standard kitchens are built with deep cabinets and dark corners. These are the enemies of organization. To fix this, we have to move toward visual transparency. Remove the doors. If you own your home or have a kind landlord, try taking the cabinet doors off for a week. Notice how much easier it is to put a dish away when you don't have to open a door to do it. Notice how much faster you can find the cereal. The clear bin revolution. If you can't remove the doors, every single thing in your pantry should be in a clear bin. Not a wicker basket. Not a pretty wooden crate. Clear plastic. When you look into a cabinet filled with clear bins, your brain can scan the contents in seconds. Decanting is not just for fancy people. Taking cereal out of a cardboard box and putting it in a clear tall container isn't just about looking Pinterest perfect. It's about knowing exactly when you are low on Cheerios. Cardboard boxes are liars. They look full until you pick them up and realize there is only one crushed flake left at the bottom. Sarah started small. She bought a set of clear bins for the kids' snacks. She labeled them with a big, bold marker, Leo Snacks and Mia Snacks. She placed them on the lowest shelf. Now, when the kids were hungry, she didn't have to stop what she was doing to find them a granola bar. They could see the bars. They could reach the bars. This system was doing the work that Sarah's brain used to do. Troubleshooting the lost in the fridge problem. The refrigerator is often the most expensive doom pile in the house. We buy fresh spinach with the best of intentions, shove it into the crisper drawer, and find it 3 weeks later when it has turned into green slime. Why does this happen? Because crisper drawers are where vegetables go to die. They are opaque. They are at the bottom. They are out of the line of sight. The solution? The reverse fridge. Try putting your condiments, mustard, mayo, pickles in the drawers at the bottom. These items have a long shelf life. You don't need to see them every day to know they are there. Then, take your fresh produce, the stuff that rots, and put it right in the middle of the top shelf. Put it in clear bowls at eye level. When Sarah tried this, it felt wrong at first. The drawer is for vegetables, she told herself. But then she realized that the person who designed the fridge didn't have her brain. By putting the salad greens right where she could see them every time she opened the door for milk, she actually started eating them. She saved $30 a week just by not throwing away slime. The one-handed kitchen. Another common obstacle in the kitchen is friction. Friction is anything that makes a task take more than one step. If your blender is stored in a box, behind a heavy mixer, in a lower cabinet, you will never make a smoothie. That is high friction. If your blender is sitting on the counter, plugged in and ready to go, that is low friction. For an ADHD brain, even a tiny bit of friction can cause task paralysis. If we have to move 3 things to get to the one thing we need, our brain often decides the whole task is too hard and gives up. Troubleshooting friction. 1. The most used rule. If you use an item every day, like a coffee mug or a specific pan, it should never be behind a door or in a stack. It should be on a hook or a pegboard. 2. Group by activity. Don't just sort by type, sort by action. Put the coffee, the sugar, the spoons, and the mugs all in one coffee station. This reduces the amount of travel time your brain has to track. 3. The trash can hack. If you find that trash often piles up on your counters, it's usually because your trash can is too far away or has a lid that is hard to open. Get a large, open-top trash can and put it exactly where you do your food prep. Don't make yourself walk across the room. Handling the "I forgot I was cooking" crisis. We have all done it. We put a pot of water on the stove to boil, walk into the living room to wait, and 40 minutes later, we wonder why the house smells like burning metal. This is time blindness. When we leave the room, the stove ceases to exist. The solution? The never leave the kitchen rule. If the heat is on, your body stays in the room. You need to make the kitchen a place you want to be. Put a comfortable stool in the corner. Keep your phone charger in the kitchen. Use dopamine pairing. Only listen to your favorite podcast while you are standing in the kitchen, waiting for the water to boil. If you must leave the room, you must carry a physical reminder. Some people use a cooking spoon as a wand. If you are holding the spoon, you are in a task. Others use a vibrating timer clipped to their pocket. A timer on the oven is useless if you are in the basement and can't hear it. Your external brain needs to be attached to your body. The FIFO system. First in, first out. Escoffier used a system called FIFO. It's very simple. The oldest food stays at the front, and the newest food goes to the back. In a standard pantry, we tend to shove new groceries in the front because we are tired. This means the half-used box of pasta gets pushed to the back, where it gets lost for a year. How to troubleshoot your pantry flow. When you come home from the store, take 60 seconds to pull the old stuff to the front before putting the new stuff in. Use a "Eat Me First" bin. This is a clear bin on the middle shelf for things that are about to expire. When you don't know what to eat, you look there first. It removes the decision fatigue of having too many choices. Dealing with roommates or partners. The kitchen is often the place where conflict happens. Sarah's husband Mark liked the pantry doors. He thought the open shelves looked messy. This is a real challenge. How do you balance your need for a visual kitchen with someone else's need for a clean look? The compromise. Use frosted glass inserts instead of solid wood doors. This allows Sarah to see the shapes and colors of the food, which triggers her memory, while hiding the clutter from Mark. The zone system. Give the neurotypical person the high-up cabinets that stay closed. Keep the point of performance areas, the counters and middle shelves, open for the ADHD person. Sarah and Mark sat down for a neurodesign meeting. She showed him the quinoa bags. She explained that she wasn't being messy on purpose. Her brain literally couldn't see the food. Mark didn't fully understand it, but he saw the logic. They decided to keep the pantry doors off, but bought matching clear bins so the shelves looked more uniform. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The power of the kitchen reset. Finally, we have to talk about the conclusion phase, the cleaning. For an ADHD brain, cleaning the kitchen is too big of a task. It feels like 1,000 tiny jobs. Instead of cleaning, try the kitchen reset. A reset is not about perfection. It's about setting up the external brain for tomorrow morning. 1. Clear the sink. You don't have to scrub it, just get the dishes into the dishwasher. 2. Wipe the launch zone. Wipe the one area where you make your morning coffee. 3. Empty the trash. Start the day with a blank slate. Sarah started doing a 10-minute reset every night at 8 p.m. She paired it with an upbeat playlist. She told herself, "I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm doing this as a gift to tomorrow Sarah." When tomorrow Sarah walked into the kitchen at 7 a.m. and saw a clear spot for her coffee mug, she felt a little less overwhelmed. The kitchen stopped being a place of shame and started being a place of function. It wasn't a Pinterest kitchen. There were still crumbs in the corners sometimes, but the doors were off, the bins were clear, and Sarah knew exactly where the quinoa was. The carbon steel knife on the block, the salt is in its clear bowl. The environment is doing the heavy lifting. Like Escoffier's chefs, you aren't fighting the room anymore. You are working with it. The kitchen is no longer a battle you have to win. It is a system that supports you. When you stand at your counter tonight, look at your point of performance. Is the tool you need within reach? Can you see your ingredients? If not, remember that you have the permission to change the room. Take off a door, move a bin, put the spinach on the top shelf. Your kitchen belongs to you, not to a magazine. It is the heart of your home, and it is finally starting to beat in time with your own rhythm. The steam rises from a pot. The timer ticks quietly on your hip, and for the first time in a long time, you know exactly what comes next. The chaos has